Hello everybody, welcome to day 3 of reading and checking out the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So before we get into reading the new section, I do want to do a quick review of what is going on just to get it back in our brains. So we have our main character, Gregor Samsa, who has woken up to find himself transformed into a horrible vermin, right? We learn that Gregor is a traveling salesman. He lives with his parents, and he seems to be taking care of his parents, or at least paying off their debts to this company. So work is really stressing him out, right? He's not even in the beginning seeming to be that worried about the fact that he believes that he has turned into a bug. He is more worried about the fact that he has got to get out of bed and he has got to get to work, because he knows if he doesn't, the bosses are going to be on him, right? So he's laying in bed and he's like, okay, I'm feeling all right. It's time to get out of bed. But then, oh my gosh, how the heck do you get out of bed when you got this big round back and you got these little crazy legs? So he spends a good amount of time just trying to figure out how to get out of bed without knocking himself unconscious, right? So it's gotten so late and his mom is like, comes in, Gregor, aren't you supposed to be somewhere, right? Being nice and passive. She knows darn well this man is supposed to already be at work. He gets up at 4 a.m. every day to go to work, and now it's already 7. His dad comes, is not so nice, right? Gregor, aren't you well? He ends up communicating with them. At first he realizes there's something wrong with his voice, but he managed to get out some words, so they kind of leave him alone for a minute as he's dealing with this whole how the heck do I get out of this bed thing. But then he hears a knock at the door, right? And he realizes, oh, this is my dang boss, right? Now his boss is here, and not just someone who works with him. It is the chief, what was he called? Let's see if we can find it. The chief clerk himself, right? And the way Gregor talks about this guy is that he seems to be important, right? Maybe that's what they called their boss back then. So he gets a little frustrated at first. He's like, why do they do this, right? Do they think everybody who works for them are louts, right? Lazy pieces of garbage that don't want to work. And he's a little frustrated, rightfully, right? This is like the first time he's ever been late, and now he's got the boss knocking on his door. Nevertheless, Gregor realizes, okay, I got to get the heck out of this bed. So he does. He flings himself onto the floor, and they hear that he falls down. So now on one door in the room, we got mom, dad, and boss man. And on the other door, we have his sister, who is seeming to try to kind of get him, let me in, let me help you, right? Maybe his sister is trying to help him out, whereas the other 3 are worried about him getting up and getting to work. His boss doesn't seem to cut him much slack. He says, in the business we're in, we have to go to work whether we are well or not. His boss says, I hope it's nothing serious, but on the other hand, I must say that if we people in commerce and sales ever become slightly unwell, then fortunately or unfortunately, as you like, we simply have to overcome it because of business considerations. Okay, so then his father says, can he come in? And he hears his sister begin to cry at the other door. So that is where we left off reading on Tuesday. So now today we are going to start here with the paragraph that said, so why? But before we start with that paragraph, I do want to take a moment and just explain to everybody what the assignment is going to be. So you are going to come to your assignments page here. I'm looking at my second period. And you are going to see that there is your attendance quiz, just like always. But then there's also this Metamorphosis Day 3 reading quiz, okay? This is going to be the assignment that goes along with today's activity. So after you watch the video, come back to this assignments page and complete this quiz. Now, if you do not like listening to me read you the text, I totally understand that. Then just come here to the assignments page and click on this Metamorphosis Day 1 through 3 text. Find where I just said to start and read to the bottom of the page, because then you don't have to listen to me talk. You can just read it on your own and give the quiz a shot. Now, if you get to the quiz and are like, oh, I don't know, maybe go back and listen to the video. But either way, as long as you get this reading quiz done and you are following along, you are good to go. She had probably only just got up and had not even begun to get dressed. And why was she crying? Was it because he had not got up and had not let the chief clerk in, because he was in danger of losing his job, and if that had happened, his boss would once more pursue their parents with the same demands as before? There was no need to worry about things like that yet. Gregor was still there and had not the slightest intentions of abandoning his family. For the time being, he just lay there on the carpet, and no one who knew the condition he was in would seriously have expected him to let the chief clerk in. It was only a minor discourtesy, and a suitable excuse could easily be found for it later on. It was not something for which Gregor could be sacked on the spot, and it seemed to Gregor much more sensible to leave him now in peace instead of disturbing him with talking at him and crying. But the others didn't know what was happening. They were worried. The world, that would excuse their behavior. The chief clerk now raised his voice. Mr. Samsa, he called to him, what's wrong? You barricade yourself in your room. You give us no more than yes or no for an answer. You are causing serious and unnecessary concern to your parents, and you fail, and I mention this just by the way, you fail to carry out your business duties in a way that is quite unheard of. I'm speaking here on behalf of your parents and of your employer, and really must request a clear and immediate explanation. I am astonished, quite astonished. I thought I knew you as a calm and sensible person, and now you suddenly seem to be showing off with peculiar whims. This morning, your employer did suggest a possible reason for your failure to appear. It's true, it had to do with the money that was recently entrusted to you. But I came near to giving him my word of honor that could not be the right explanation. But now that I see your incomprehensible stubbornness, I no longer feel any wish whatsoever to intercede on your behalf. And nor is your position all that secure. I had originally intended to say all of this to you in private, but since you caused me to waste my time here for no good reason, I don't see why your parents should not also learn of it. Your turnover has been very unsatisfactory of late. I grant you that it is not the time of year to do especially good business. We recognize that, but there simply is no time of year to do no business at all, Mr. Samsa. We cannot allow there to be. So the boss dude is getting a little mad, right? But he's kind of just spouting off his business in front of everybody. So let's see what Gregor has to say. But sir, called Gregor, beside himself and forgetting all else in the excitement, I'll open up immediately. Just a moment. I'm slightly unwell. An attack of dizziness. I haven't been able to get up. I'm still in bed now. I'm quite fresh again now, though. I'm just getting out of bed. Just a moment. Be patient. It's not quite as easy as I thought. I'm quite all right now, though. It's shocking what can suddenly happen to a person. I was quite all right last night. My parents know about it. Perhaps better than me. I had a small symptom of it last night already. They must have noticed it. I don't know why I didn't let you know at work, but you always think you can get over an illness without staying at home. Please, don't make my parents suffer. There's no basis for any of the accusations you're making. Nobody's ever said a word to me about any of these things. Maybe you haven't read the latest contracts I sent in. I'll set off with the 8 o'clock train as well. These few hours of rest have given me strength. You don't need to wait, sir. I'll be in the office soon after you. And please be so good as to tell that to the boss and recommend me to him, right? He's asking asking the chief clerk to back him up a little bit right here. And while Gregor gushed out these words, hardly knowing what he was saying, he made his way over to the chest of drawers. That was easily done, probably because of the practice he had already had in bed, where he now tried to get himself upright. He really did want to open the door, really did want to let them see him and to speak with the chief clerk. The others were being so insistent, and he was curious to learn what they would say when they caught sight of him. If they were shocked, then it would no longer be Gregor's responsibility, and he could rest. If, however, they took everything calmly, he would still have no reason to be upset. And if he hurried, he really could be at the station for the 8 o'clock train. The first few times he tried to climb up on the smooth chest of drawers, he just slid down again, but he finally gave himself one last swing and stood there, upright. The lower part of his body was in serious pain, but he no longer gave any attention to it. By now he had also calmed down and kept quiet so that he could listen to what the chief clerk was saying. "Did you understand a word of that?" the chief clerk asked his parents. "Surely he's not trying to make fools of us." "Oh, God," called his mother, who was already in tears. "He could be seriously ill, and we're making him suffer. Greta, Greta," she then cried. "Mother," his sister called from the other side. They communicated across Gregor's room. "You'll have to go to the doctor straight away. Gregor is ill. Quick, get the doctor. Did you hear the way Gregor spoke just now?" "That was the voice of an animal," said the chief clerk with the calmness that was in contrast with his mother's screams. "Anna, Anna," his father called into the kitchen through the entrance hall, clapping his hands. "Get a locksmith here, now." And the two girls, their skirts swishing, immediately ran out through the hall, wrenching open the front door of the flat as they went. How had his sister managed to get dressed so quickly? There was no sound of the door banging shut again. They must have left it open. People often do in homes where something awful has happened. So it sounds like they recognize Gregor's voice is not right? So Gregor is able to hear himself talk the way he thinks he's sounding, but it sounds like they're not hearing it the same way. So Gregor, in contrast, had become much calmer. So they couldn't understand his words anymore. Although they seemed clear enough to him, clearer than before, perhaps his ears had become used to the sound. They had realized, though, that there was something wrong with him and were ready to help. The first response to a situation had been confident and wise, and that made him feel better. He felt that he had been drawn back in among people, and from the doctor and the locksmith he expected great and surprising achievements, although he did not really distinguish one from the other. Whatever was said next would be crucial. So, in order to make his voice as clear as possible, he coughed a little. But taking care to do this not too loudly, as even this might well sound different from the way that a human coughs, and he was no longer sure he could judge for himself. Meanwhile, it had become very quiet in the next room. Perhaps his parents were sat at the table whispering with the chief clerk, or perhaps they were all pressed against the door and listening. Gregor slowly pushed his way over to the door with the chair. Once there, he let go of it and threw himself onto the door, holding himself upright against it, using the adhesive on the tips of his legs. He rested there a while, to recover from the effort involved, and then set himself to the task of turning the key in the lock with his mouth. He seemed, unfortunately, to have no proper teeth. How was he then to grasp the key? But the lack of teeth was, of course, made up for with a very strong jaw. Using the jaw, he really was able to start the turning of the key, ignoring the fact that he must have been causing some kind of damage, as a brown fluid came from his mouth, flowed over the key, and dripped onto the floor. "Listen," said the chief clerk in the next room. "He's turning the key." Gregor was greatly encouraged by this. But they all should have been calling to him, his father and his mother too. "Well done, Gregor," they should have cried. "Keep at it. Keep hold of the lock." And with the idea that they were all excitedly following his efforts, he bit on the key with all his strength, paying no attention to the pain he was causing himself. As the key turned round, he turned round the lock with it, only holding himself upright with his mouth, and hung onto the key or pushed it down again with the whole weight of his body as needed. The clear sound of the lock as it snapped back was Gregor's sign that he could break his concentration, and as he regained his breath, he said to himself, "So, I didn't need the locksmith after all." Then he laid his head on the handle of the door to open it completely. Okay, before we start this next section, I want to take a moment to talk about the pain that Gregor is feeling. Right? This isn't the first time this morning Gregor has put himself through pain in order to do something that he knows that he has to do. So this time is with him trying to get that door unlocked so that he can let them in and maybe relieve some of this tension that he feels like he's causing. And if you remember, the first time is not only when he was trying to get out of bed, right, but when he was moving around, the lower part of his body, it seems, was the most sensitive, right? So every time he tried to get upright or roll off the bed, he was inflicting pain on himself. So as we move forward, pay attention to that. Are there more instances where Gregor is feeling pain or dealing with pain in order to make other people happy or satisfied? Because he had to open the door in this way, it was already wide open before he could be seen. He had first to slowly turn himself round one of the double doors, and he had to do it very carefully if he did not want to fall flat on his back before entering the room. He was still occupied with this difficult movement, unable to pay attention to anything else, when he heard the chief clerk exclaim aloud, "Oh!" which sounded like a soughing of the wind. Now he also saw him. He was the nearest to the door, his hand pressed against his mouth, slowly retreating as if driven by a steady and invisible force. Gregor's mother, her hair still disheveled from bed despite the chief clerk being there, looked at his father. Then she unfolded her arms, took 2 steps forward towards Gregor, and sank down onto the floor into her skirt, and spread themselves out around her as her head disappeared down onto her breast. His father looked hostile and clenched his fist as if wanting to knock Gregor back into his room. Then he looked uncertainly round the living room, covered his eyes with his hands, and wept so that his powerful chest shook. So this is the first time anybody is seeing Gregor. So Gregor did not go into the room, but leant against the inside of the other door, which was still held bolted in place. In this way, only half of his body could be seen, along with his head above it, which he leant over to one side as he peered out at the others. Meanwhile, the day had become much lighter. Part of the endless gray-black building on the other side of the street, which was a hospital, could be seen quite clearly with the austere and regular lines of windows piercing its facade. The rain was still falling, now throwing down large individual drops which hit the ground one at a time. The washing up from breakfast lay on the table. There was so much of it because for Gregor's father, breakfast was the most important meal of the day, and he would stretch it out for several hours as he sat reading a number of different newspapers. On the wall exactly opposite, there was a photograph of Gregor when he was a lieutenant in the army, his sword in his hand and a carefree smile on his face as he called forth respect for his uniform and bearing. The door to the entrance hall was open, and as the front door of the flat was also open, he could see onto the landing and the stairs where they began their way down below. "Now then," said Gregor, well aware that he was the only one to have kept calm, "I'll get dressed straight away, pack up my samples, and set off. Will you please just let me leave? You can see," he said to the chief clerk, "that I'm not stubborn, and I like to do my job. Being a commercial traveler is arduous, but without traveling I couldn't earn my living. So where are you going?" "Into the office." "Yes. Will you report everything accurately then?" It's quite possible for someone to be temporarily unable to work, but that's just the right time to remember what's been achieved in the past and consider that later on, once the difficulty has been removed, he will certainly work with all the more diligence and concentration. So Gregor's making an argument for himself, right? "You're well aware that I'm seriously in debt to our employer, as well as having to look after my parents and my sister, so that I'm trapped in a difficult situation, but I will work my way out of it again. Please don't make things any harder for me than they already are, and don't take sides against me at the office. I know that nobody likes the travelers. They think we earn an enormous wage as well as having a soft time of it. That's just prejudice. But they have no particular reason to think better of it. But you, sir, you have a better overview than the rest of the staff. In fact, if I can say this in confidence, a better overview than the boss himself." Gregor's trying to maybe suck up to this guy a little bit. "It's very easy for a businessman like him to make mistakes about his employees and judge them more harshly than he should. And you're also well aware that we travelers spend almost the whole year away from the office, so that we can easily fall victim to gossip and chance the groundless complaints, and it's almost impossible to defend yourself from that sort of thing. We don't usually even hear about them, or, if at all, it's when we arrive back home exhausted from a trip, and that's when we feel the harmful effects of what's been going on without even knowing what caused them. Please don't go away. At least first say something to show that you grant that I'm at least partly right." But the chief clerk has turned away as soon as Gregor had started to speak, and with protruding lips only stared back at him over his trembling shoulders as he left. He did not keep still for a moment while Gregor was speaking, but moved steadily towards the door without taking his eyes off of him. He moved very gradually, as if there had been some secret prohibition on leaving the room. It was only when he had reached the entrance hall that he made a sudden movement, drew his foot from the living room, and rushed forward in a panic. In the hall, he stretched his right hand far out towards the stairway, as if out there was some supernatural force waiting to save him. That is all for today. Remember, after you watch this video, go back and complete the assignment. Thanks for tuning in and doing such a great job, and I will see you later. Alright, so this is where we are going to stop for today.